Welcome. We've got Kathy McKenzie here, who is the MCC Master Certified Coach, which congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you, Vinay. It's great to
You're
be
welcome.
here.
And the founder of Fire Up Coaching, which teaches leadership and coach training. And she's also, let me make sure I get the words right here, researching and establishing a new blend of NLP, neuroscience, coaching, and brain dominance called Neuro Coaching. And that is what really attracted me to Kathy, because I love it when coaches are bringing in and amalgamating different modalities to come up with something that's unique and special and even more transformational possibly together. So I'm really excited to learn all about Neuro Coaching today, Kathy. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Vinay. And it is an exciting area and it's an evolving field. So I'm certainly not going to say that I've got everything about it today, because it's something that's, as you said, is an amalgamation. I love that word. It's a really evolving field around what's been developing and what we're still researching.
Yes, and I've been noticing, I follow lots of the trends in the coaching industry, and like neuro everything just keeps coming up. Like it seems to be the mode of the day, the something du jour.
Yeah, if in doubt, put neuro in front of it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Okay, so let's just kick off then with, tell us, what is neuro coaching and how did it come about for you?
For me, I actually registered the domain name probably 7 or 8 years ago. I first came across Neuro Linguistic Programming when I was living in Canada in the 90s and did my NLP training there. And that was a fantastic, transformational, life-changing experience for me. And I, like lots of people who study NLP, got super duper excited about it and set up my business and wanted the world to know all about NLP. And, and then came back to Australia and established my business and kept learning. So then I did a master's in vocational education and training and started looking at more of the neuroscience side of things, got interested in David Rock's research and saw a wonderful speaker at a ICF conference called Jeffrey Schwartz. And I think that was, for me, the first kind of introduction to really having neuroscience and some of these new modalities coming into coaching. And he was talking about people with obsessive compulsive disorder and how their brain just works in such a way that they just have to keep washing their hands. And he talked about free won't. And I know we all hear about free will, but he was talking about that 0.02 of a second between when your brain directs its attention to what you're going to do and that moment to pause and go, no, actually, I won't react that way. I'm going to do something else. And with people with, obsessive compulsive disorder, that's what they wanted them to do is, I won't wash my hands now, because actually, even though something in my brain is saying, you've got to wash your hands, they're dirty. No, they're not. It's a false trigger. And neuro coaching has kind of evolved out of that, recognizing when your brain is triggered off in a way to go, oh, I'm anxious about something that there's no need to be anxious about, or feeling, paranoid or concerned that someone's judging you when actually the only one judging you is yourself, and really understanding how it's the patterns in your brain that are leading to some of the consequences. And as a coach, if we can really be attuned to the neurology, to what's going on in terms of how people are filtering their experience and then creating their experience, we can develop and create those conversations or expand those conversations in a way that supports them to have neurology or thinking that is leading them to happiness and joy and things they want rather than things they don't want.
Right. So, I mean, in there, and just when you were speaking, I did my NLP training as well. And it's all about kind of disrupting patterns. So
yes,
the thing that really popped out was this idea of inspiring a pause.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then giving them the free will, or the free will. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. How does neuro coaching address that? I mean, I'm familiar with a couple of the NLP processes, like some of them I don't like the ones that are disruptors, like to not smoke, or to, like, they just feel a little bit gimmicky. How does this compare to that? And I'm sorry if I doubt neuro coaching is gimmicky, but how does it compare to, for any, I was an NLP skeptic until I studied it. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think one of the differences between NLP practitioners and becoming a master practitioner is that it assumes that you have all the knowledge of what intervention needs to happen with the client. And coaching flips that on its head in terms of it's client-centered, it's future-focused, and you assume that the person that you're working with has all the resources they need to solve their own issues in their life. And that's where it's different. And NLP, whilst it's got some very useful components, has also got some parts that, were based on research in the 70s and 80s that we've far, transcended beyond that. And I first did my brain dominance training in 2004. And that's when I realized that even the triune brain model that they talk about in NLP, there's been a massive amount of research done around whole brain thinking. And as a neuro coach, I'm looking for the indicators that show me what someone's thinking preferences are, what their brain dominance is. And by recognizing as a coach what someone's brain dominance is, you can then either adapt your style to ensure that you're building that strong bridge of trust and rapport with them, or you can expand the conversation so that they are able to tap into different parts of their brain, different neurology. And as a coach, unless you're able to understand the neurology behind those patterns, behind those sort of potentially limiting beliefs or repetitive behaviours that are not serving people, all those things that can stop people from living their potential fully. As a coach, when you're really not just focusing on what they're saying, but how they're saying it, how they're processing, then you can be much more supportive in terms of being able to direct their attention somewhere else. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if we can actually direct their attention somewhere else and they start to notice a difference in the way that they feel or the results that they're getting, then that starts moving us towards what they want.
I love what you said about, the thing where the client actually has the answers within them. And I sometimes wonder if a large part of the coaching community is forgetting that piece of a puzzle.
Yeah.
I wonder, would you like to speak to that at all, or is that something that
Benet, I would love to speak to that, because as a coach, putting your ego back in its box is such an important part of being effective. And I learnt so much last year from doing my master coach certification, because I had to do 15 different recordings before my mentors said, yep, you're finally really trusting the process. You're finally really trusting that your client does have all the answers. And I notice how powerful that is with people now, when I get out of the way and let the questions lead to that exploration, that answer, that awareness.
You give us some tips on how to get out of your way.
I think when you find yourself wanting to give an opinion, and for coaching, just think about it as, how much input am I having into this conversation? Because if you are inputting too much, you're impacting on the client's ability to just stay in the space and reflect. So my first tip would be catch yourself when you are inputting something that potentially is assuming that the client can't come to that realization themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another key part of it is to really, really look at your client's physiology and pay attention to just letting that silence sit. Just let that silence be for as long as it takes before they respond.
Mm. Yeah, it's so tempting to fill the quiet spaces, isn't it?
Incredibly so. And also one of the things I think is don't take responsibility for the client's outcomes. And by that, I don't mean, like, as a coach, obviously we have an obligation to work with our clients in a way that gets them outcomes and results. However, it's your skill as a coach and the questions and the processes that you're using that get the client to that. It's not, you don't own the outcome. Mm-hmm. And it's not, you have to let go of being a good or a bad coach.
Can you expand a little bit on that? Because I know that's something that I struggle with. Like, how do I know when it's a fine line, to know when it's their responsibility and when it's yours. And I tend to lean on the side of trying to take too much responsibility and feeling guilty and that kind of stuff, which is my own stuff. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's about asking yourself the question of, am I noticing emotions here that could be clouding this session? And it's about reflecting on what emotions came up for you as you're coaching someone. Mm-hmm. And it is an interesting thing when you start coaching that quite often your own issues come into the space.
Yeah.
And unless you're really aware, it's the universe kind of saying to you, wake up, but if you're not aware, you can actually hijack the client's session with your own stuff, because it is there for you to learn, but it's also there for you to not take into their space, which I don't know if that makes sense. But
so can I just reflect back? What I'm hearing is in a way you need to be a passive conduit. You're not coloring. You're reflecting black, but you're doing your best to remain clear. I mean, this is a hot discussion point, I think, in the coaching and healing community. Is like, how do you navigate that?
And look, I think it's that whole being versus doing is as a coach, if you're doing all the work, then you're not really asking the right questions or getting the client into the space to think about their obligations. If you're owning that, I've got to get them to this place, or I've got to get them to recognize this, that immediately means you're not just being present with, this is their journey, this is their space for learning, this is their timing.
So you really have to surrender and trust the process.
Trust the process, absolutely. And interestingly, the more you do that, the more it works.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you. We went down a little bit of a thing, but I think that it shows, the richness and the depth that you have in the subject matter of coaching. Because you can answer these kind of questions with real certainty. So thank you. I'm sure I learned a lot with that. So I'm sure our listeners did too. I'm coloring the conversation.
Oh, no, it's still fresh in my mind, because the amount of times that even when I was doing my mentor coaching for my master coaching certification, what both Peter and Tracy, who were my mentors, they had different techniques, but they would sort of I would listen back, or I would read back the transcript of the coaching session. And I think for me, it was a real aha moment when they were like, they don't need you to keep going. You don't need to be their cheer squad. Because what I noticed I did a lot of is, oh, that's great, Benet. Oh, that's amazing. You're wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And
I like that, though.
Exactly.
Give it to me.
However, you know, what happens when you're not there to be their cheer squad?
Yeah.
Coaching's about empowerment, and you need to leave them in a space where they're empowered when you're not there being their cheer squad. And it was really interesting that I was like, oh no, but you know, what if they don't get that validation from me? And especially as I've built a coaching model that's around the last part of is honor, which is validate the client. However, you can validate someone really effectively without
saying good girl.
Yeah, without saying good girl. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a really great learning for me, is giving people that unconscious validation without necessarily needing a lot of words around it.
Well, a concept I've been exploring in my own life quite a lot, especially as a mother, is judgment, and how even saying good job is it's a judgment. So rather saying, I really appreciate how you did that, or just trying to look for new words, and like my brain isn't used to it. It's like a bit of a, so coming back to neuro coaching, you know, I guess in a way I'm trying to pause before I hear that and remodel what I'm saying to not be a judgment in either way, to be an actual observation that my daughter can then take on board and do what she wants, rather than need mommy's yes all the time.
Absolutely. And you know, and if we link it to neuro coaching as a coach, there's so many layers of our brain and our neurology. It is so complex that, you know, it does take continually learning yourself as a coach to be able to recognize those things and notice that, you know, there's been a lot of work done about, you know, in the simple NLP terms, it was move towards, move away from. However, the research that's been done further into that is around all the triggers that activate people when they're either feeling like, so the David Rock research around neuro leadership, that particularly is really interesting when you're coaching at the moment. He has a model called SCARF, which is status, certainty, SCARF, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, and how each of us can be triggered quite emotionally by certain things. So for instance, if someone perceives that their status has been impacted, so let's say someone's had a corner office and then they refurb the whole building and they get stuck in the middle, and it's like, oh, that, you know, that status symbol of the corner office, which is, you know, that's an old example, but it's quite useful to think about that for a lot of people at the moment, their status is impacted because they can't be seen at their favourite restaurants. Even if in COVID, you think about, it's been a bit of a leveler in terms of everybody's restricted in the same way to a certain degree. And certainty, there's no lack of certainty in society. Autonomy, we don't have a lot of say in some of the things happening to us at the moment. Relatedness, like, you know, people's most deep, like one of people's deepest needs is to connect. And that relatedness, you know, I was just coaching a farmer earlier who normally would have lots of visitors, and this year has been quite lonely because there's no one allowed out to their farm. And then fairness is one of my triggers, and when I'm coaching other people, I notice this, that for a lot of people, their neurology is really stimulated if they perceive that things are unfair, and you see a lot of that at the moment.
I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, what was the first one again? What was the S?
Status.
That's the corner office. Okay. Certainty. I'm going to have to reflect on that one for myself. Okay. Well, let's jump into now. You know, if a coach is, I mean, the reason I do this column, the Tools for Transformation column, is to expose coaches, healers, people that are interested in this kind of stuff, you know, leading transformation and facilitating transformation for others. You know, this is kind of a way to showcase different modalities that are out there. So, you know, if I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm always looking like, what's the next one I need to add into my toolkit? So what is it that, in your opinion, that makes neuro coaching so extraordinarily transformational and worthwhile having in your toolkit as a coach?
Well, depending how brave you are, I can actually show everybody.
Okay, I can be brave.
All right.
Oh shit.
Showing's better than telling. There's Judith Glaser did wonderful work around conversational intelligence, and it's around refocus, reframe, redirect. If I give you an example, if you notice perhaps an area, I was just talking about all those potential triggers. If you notice an area where sometimes you get triggered or you have a negative emotion, can you relate to somewhere where you feel a bit vulnerable at times or have a negative feeling?
Yes. I could probably pick a whole bunch.
Okay. And I don't even need content here to demonstrate.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No. So, and this is the whole idea with coaching, is that your content is your content. And my job is to help you to refocus or reconnect to what is going on for you. And I'm curious to just notice, if you did a body scan now and noticed, where do you get a sense of that negative emotion in your body?
I would say it's a mixture between like my chest and my gut.
Okay,
somewhere
great.
in that cavity. Yeah.
All right. If you were to breathe, just breathe into that and notice how you do, you get a feeling in there. Notice as you breathe into that, if you were to ask yourself, what is it through having this emotion that this part wants for me that's positive?
Keep me safe. From being hurt, from messing up.
Notice how, even though it starts with a negative, we can quickly transform things when we just ask the person to really connect in with the neurology, because then that, without spending an hour doing a whole process, those sorts of processes like the core alignment that you can blend with other neurological questions help people to reframe negatives and understand what the positive intention is. And neuro coaching is all around interrupting those neurological patterns that are not serving you anymore and replacing them. So the whole concept of neuroplasticity, that you can actually replace those negative patterns with the positive intention. Now, interestingly enough, I know when I was first managing at flight centres, and we used to have these conferences all over the place, and I remember going somewhere where they were like, you blew up balloons of your negative feelings and then popped them and threw them out the window and all these things. And the interesting thing is that those negative parts are often most deeply connected to our powerful parts. And by actually throwing out a negative belief without reframing it, you haven't actually got to the essence of how that part of you serves you. And NLP started and touched on this, but the more we understand about even brain dominance for people who are more right brain limbic dominant, then they often find it harder to get out of those negative feelings. And the more you can actually go, okay, well, now I understand what's going on for that person. I need to get them into the cerebral cortex. I need to get them future focused, thinking of what's possible and how this part can serve them in the future in positive ways and serving the original positive intention. Because my experience doing thousands of these transformational processes is that very few people, and I can't even think of one in recent times because I do it so unconsciously, very few people cannot find the positive in their negative behaviours and emotions. That's an example. That's an example of neuro coaching, is being able to detect that neurological pattern and allow the client of an experience of its current state, and then be able to shift that into a future desired state.
Uh-huh. I'm just feeling like it helps you detect it, helps your client feel it, and then shift it. Is it feeling, that middle place?
Yeah.
That's what you got me to do.
Yeah.
Shift it. So it seems, this is really appealing to me. I mean, I have an IT background, so it's kind of an analytical process.
Absolutely. And
Like
then
it's like a puzzle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Did you want to say something else?
No, I was going to say, so as soon as you identify that part wants you to be safe, well, ironically, probably what you're doing at the moment is not actually getting the outcome. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of this contradictory and conflicting. They're kind of, you've got the foot on the accelerator and the brake at the same time.
Yeah, that's what it feels like sometimes.
And so when you can actually just start finding a new neural pathway to forge, and that whole neurons that fire together, wire together, the more you activate that new neural pathway, then that becomes the new habit. Charles Duhigg's got a whole book on habits and how you replace habits, and the importance of recognizing that if you've got a pattern or a habit that's just it's like a freeway and you're always going down that same and you need to create your own exit ramps to actually go, whoa, I'm going down that way again, let me just go off an exit ramp, and that's in our relationships. At the moment, I mean, conversations around choice and vaccinations and things that can just, a conversation can turn really gnarly very quickly, and to actually notice, whoa, I don't want to be reactive in this conversation. I want to be present with this person. I want to understand and have compassion for how they're expressing themselves, rather than just jumping down their throat and going, like, how do you recommend, I mean,
there's been a bit of that.
There's been a lot of that lately. And it doesn't serve, it doesn't serve humanity when we lose our compassion.
It creates separateness.
Yeah. But people get hardening, what I call hardening of the categories, where all of a sudden things are fixed. And this is where neuro coaching is around, making it more malleable. How do you actually get that person with that really fixed mindset to see that, is this being done with compassion? Is this being done from the best space? I was watching Amanda Vanstone on that interview last night around the Billawheeler children saying, we can't make an exception for this, this with these Tamil family, if we make an exception for them, then and it's like, where's the compassion in that conversation? Where's that, that looking at those children and seeing the impact that we're having on two little children because we want to follow, and that's classic brain dominance. We've got rules and we'll follow those rules. Well, what about when those rules are, cruel and causing pain and suffering? And it's that whole having a whole brain approach and particularly coaching teams at the moment. I've got a whole brain model for dealing with a pandemic, and questions that take people into all different parts of their brain so that a team doesn't argue about things that are going on, but actually contemplates and thinks about, wow, yeah, there's all of these different aspects of that, and depending on which part of my brain I'm looking at it from, I'll see different perspectives.
Yeah. If somebody is going to study neuro coaching, did you go into the repatterning process as well?
So much of what our coaching programs are is just getting people to recognize how to shift patterns in others, how to, and not to think you have to shift the pattern, to actually use the processes and tools that allow someone to notice that it's possible for them to be different. It's possible for them to get different results around whatever it is they're working on. And that's why, my first exploration into NLP was a weekend workshop, and it's that classic, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And This was in 1995 and I was still working for Flight Centres. And so I did the weekend workshop and they'd done this little activity and I couldn't even really remember. But I thought, I was the learning and development manager. So I was running this conference. So I lay everyone down and got them to do this sort of inner child thing. I had people in tears and like, I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? It was terrible. So that was what inspired me to go, you know what? I don't think I know enough about what I'm doing here. And yeah, the brain is incredible, you know, unless you really, really pay attention to what's going on for the other person, you can be triggering off a whole lot of trauma very unintentionally. And that's where, you know, continuing to learn as a coach, I'm doing some mental health training in a couple of weeks, actually, just because we're living in really complex times. You've got to keep noticing, and neuro coaching is around that. It's like neuroscience is complex. All of these things don't just change overnight, and being able to recognize the triggers is an important thing. And that's why I just want to do a bit more around, you know, picking up those first signals of mental health or warnings that someone's mental health is declining.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I would like to ask you about what type of a person, a student, is ideal for. What are the characteristics you look for somebody who's wants to learn neurocoaching?
Look, I think neurocoaching is for people who've already got some awareness. I think, you know, the danger if people don't already have a level of emotional intelligence and awareness before they come into studying this kind of material is that they haven't done enough work on themselves to be able to hold the space for other people well enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they need to kind of already be on kind of that path of consciousness and and like, personal development, and then on their own right first.
And we don't offer it as, you know, we get people to do the foundational coaching course, and I guess the first building blocks of it are whether we get people to do the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, which is a brain profiling tool that's 30% biological and 70% environmental, and that's people's first introduction to whole brain thinking and how to actually notice your own preferences first in order to be able to then be able to detect it in others.
So would you say that you already really need to have a coaching certification before you take on neuro coaching?
No, not necessarily, but you need to have a certain level of self-leadership, I guess. And lots of people are, you know, lots of people have worked, you know, in environments where they've learned enormous amounts about themselves and others over years, and they may not have a coach training, but they've got an enormous amount of, you know, learning and professional development that they've done.
Okay. Let's see. How easy or hard is it to make a business from neuro coaching or a career?
Look, neuro coaching itself on its own is a component of a coaching business, and we live in pretty exciting times in terms of coaching, because I know we've just got a number of new coaching engagements that are, you know, government departments paying us to coach people for 12 months, unheard of 10 years ago. And I know that coaching, because there's a huge amount of pressure on the psychological field at the moment, there's not enough psychologists to go around, and the overflow, if people haven't got severe clinical issues, you know, coaching can help people to get back on track and to just focus positively, as long as people have got the right credentials around that. So I think coaching is at the moment, it's certainly, if you're very clear on who you want to help and how you want to help them. I think if you try and be all things, well, it's the thing I notice always as a mentor coach to others, when people try to be you know, all things to all people, when they don't have a really clear understanding of, you know, what client, when you work with them, gives you absolute joy. Like I've just had 3 coaching sessions today, and John, my husband, when I came out, he goes, God, you were laughing a lot there. And I said, oh, look, we just had a great session. And it was coaching couples, which was great. Look, I haven't done a lot of that. And today's made me realise, wow, that's a really cool space to get into, is coaching couples, because they've got different neurology going on. And it's fascinating watching it, you know, as you get them to click together and set their goals together. It's really, really great stuff.
Oh, that sounds awesome. What do you think about, you know, I've been in the coaching industry since about 2006, you know, and you see, you know, a lot of solopreneurs coming up, and they're spending a lot of money on their brand and their image, and it's them. And I mean, coaching, it is a personal relationship. So I can see the business model, versus, I don't know, getting a job as a coach, or it feels like a lot of graduates gravitate towards that, you know, Instagram persona kind of business. Or maybe I'm just not exposed enough to the corporate world, but I know you're in another side. I'd love to hear your perspective on that broader, a new graduate. Like what are the options out there?
No, I agree, Renee. I think 10 years ago, you didn't have the options that you do now. And that's why so many people kind of got forced down the solopreneur route, because there wasn't jobs as coaches. But I had a recent graduate from last year's course actually ring me last week, and she had 3 opportunities. As one of the banks was looking for capability coaches, and she had another business looking for coaches to work with young leaders and emerging leaders. And then another one, what was the third? The other one was a coaching in-house at an organisation where they actually had full-time coaches working with their people. And that's only evolved in the last maybe even 5 years. And COVID has certainly sped that up, because it's not like businesses can afford to go, well, and not that coaches are any cheaper than psychologists, but a lot of businesses are not going to there's not enough psychologists around. So they might want to have an organizational psychologist who heads up an area and then has coaches that support the rollout of coaching and mentoring in an organization. And I think because there was no, there was no regulations when you and I got into coaching. It's like, did anyone ever ask whether you were accredited or not? It was no big deal. Whereas because there is a glut of coaches now, if you haven't got something that distinguishes you from somebody else, then it's going to be much more competitive than it was, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Does that answer that?
I think so. I'm just saying, I'm dying to show this book, because you were talking about organizations that like bring in-house coaches. You know, I'm a huge fan of this.
I still haven't got it. I have to get it. Yeah.
You've got to read it. So,
I know. I'm going to write that down right
now.
The
whole model is, smaller teams and that work with coaches rather than having a hierarchy. So the coach facilitates that self-discussion. And I mean, if the world does turn to this next evolution in organizational management, coaches are going to be needed everywhere. So I'm super excited about that and the future of coaching.
Look, the future of coaching is enormous. And look, if I look back at my first corporate job, if you like, because after nursing, I mean, I went into nursing at the end of school, but my first corporate job was with flight centres. And they were doing this well before it was even, a thing. And, Graham Turner and Jeff Harris, who were my bosses at flight centres, were so big on no hierarchies. We're all equal here. And, you get to a conference and as a 24-year-old be going, I don't know, what would I have to contribute? And they're like, a lot, like, tell us what, and it was amazing to be in a culture. Now that didn't stay that way. And I think they've been through their ups and downs. However, it was interesting. I was watching Graham Turner speak on a leadership forum yesterday, and he was talking about going back to kind of that really supportive model within the organization and partnering, and which is what they were built on originally. So, I think we're definitely going to see that in-house coaches are just a normal thing.
Yeah, I think that's super exciting. And I think too, a message that coaches who are listening to this need to hear too, like that, solopreneur path isn't the only path that's out there. But a lot of coaches that I've been speaking to don't necessarily know that they can look. There are other places to go. Okay, let's move on. Let's see, what else do I need to cover? How can somebody learn more? Oh no, actually, how can somebody experience a neuro coaching session if they want to like feel it out for themselves?
Yeah, look, I've got a website that has just been launched actually, neurocoaching.com.au, and we've got a lot of our coaches who are neuro coaches. So they did the training earlier in the year, and they're able to do some of those processes that are around transformational thinking. And people can either jump onto the neurocoaching.com.au or onto the FireUp website.
Great. So, and if I want to go experience a neuro coaching session, what would be a good kind of problem to bring to the table? Something to get help on.
Lack of confidence, lack of clarity.
Great.
Overwhelm, procrastination.
Anything. Yeah. Procrastination. Yeah. I mean, we're talking to, business owners.
Yeah.
Mostly in this episode. So yeah, those are all things that you as a business owner or somebody who's about to step off into this new career are likely
absolutely
to experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to, like, my biggest observation is that, you don't have to wait for things to be perfect, and people often just don't launch because they're, I've got to have a better website or a better this, all of those sorts of things. And getting a coach yourself can help you to get the belief around, the world's waiting for me. I've got great skills to offer, and here I come. And that's what's really important, is not sort of using as a crutch that, my website's not quite right, or my face, I haven't all that I haven't done. Just get out there and meet someone who needs your service and start doing it.
Yeah. All right, Kathy, can you tell us, if somebody is really excited about neuro coaching like I am right now, where can they actually study this?
Look, we have a neuro coaching component to our course, which is actually an accredited coach training program. So it's aligned to the International Coach Federation core competencies. And part of that is embodying a coaching mindset, and neuro coaching is part of that. They can go to our website, fireup.com.au, or they can ring 1300 FireUp, and we can send them some information. And as we get into the new year, into 2022, we'll be running some of them live as well as online.
Great. Okay. So that means, I guess, that people from all over the world can
absolutely
join this course.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Correct.
And is there anything at this point that's just neuro coaching specific? Like if you've already got a coach certification?
Look, we've got a 3-day program that I ran in Melbourne early in the year. God, now I think about that now. We actually ran a face-to-face program. And we'll replicate that as just a something that gives coaches continuing education credits.
Yeah. Okay. Continuing ed. Great. So that's something that if somebody just wants a little taster, they could maybe opt in for that 3-day and understand. And then if somebody did join that course, could they then go and use those?
Absolutely.
With their clients?
Yeah. Like people who've done coach training somewhere else, they don't need to have trained with us, but they can come and actually do some of those processes. And in our confidence coach, we're having a confidence coaching conference where I'm going to lead one of those sessions on March 21st and 22nd next year. So there's details of that on the website as well.
Okay. And I'll be sure to share that in my communities as well. So
yeah,
keep an eye out for that. All right, now, Kathy, this is the bonus section where I always ask the people I'm interviewing a couple of questions. 4 questions. Okay.
Excellent.
So, you ready? So
yep.
This is just more of a get to know who's Kathy. Okay, so the first one is, what is the number one piece of advice that you'd like to give to coaches today?
Be comfortable being who you are.
Nice. And succinct. And the next question is, Kathy, what is your definition of success?
Walking away from something filled with joy.
Next question. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for living with my beautiful husband in a beautiful place with a wonderful community.
And last but not least, if you were going to just share 3 truths about life that you've learned so far in this beautiful journey with your nearest and dearest, what were the 3 things that you would share with them?
I think something I keep learning many times is be careful about staying right. Like, sometimes when you're right, there's a time to go, oh, actually, that's not serving me anymore. Maybe I'm not right anymore. So I think changing our mind, but when we think we're right, just don't always stay in that space.
Nice. Okay, that's number 1.
Bits of advice. Always have compassion for the other person's point of view.
And the last one.
And every day do something that makes you happy.
Beautiful. All right. That concludes the bonus questions. Thank you for playing.
Oh, thank you, Vinay. Thank you so much for having me. It's just been a privilege to hang out with you for an hour.
Oh man, the privilege has really been all mine. There's so much more I want to ask you and talk about. So I'll be knocking on your door soon.
Thank you. And thank you to all your listeners.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening and happy coaching.
Bye. Happy coaching.